The snow had started falling early that year, as if the North itself was angry and wanted blood. Robb Stark, young and sharp-eyed, stood outside his war tent, staring at the sky like it held answers. His direwolf, Grey Wind, stood beside him, quiet and alert. The air was cold, but Robb's mind was burning with one thought. King's Landing must fall. Joffrey must die. The War of the Five Kings had already taken too much. His father, Eddard Stark, was executed like a traitor. His sisters were still trapped in the lion's den. And every raven that flew in from the south carried news of more suffering, more betrayal. But now things were different. The North had won a real victory. Tywin Lannister was dead, caught in a surprise ambush near Harrenhal. The mighty Lord of Casterly Rock fell in battle after underestimating Robb's scouts. That one battle changed everything. Without Tywin, the Lannister army broke apart like a cracked shield. Some fled, others bent the knee. And Robb didn't stop marching. He had one goal left: take King's Landing and end the Lannisters' rule once and for all. Inside the Red Keep, Queen Cersei was drowning in fear. She still sat on her golden chair, drinking wine and pretending to be strong, but her eyes kept darting toward the window. She knew Robb was coming. Joffrey, her son, sat on the Iron Throne, playing with his crossbow like a child who thought he was a king. No one dared tell him the truth, but truth was riding closer every day, and it came with wolves. Robb Stark reached the gates of King's Landing in less than 2 weeks. He didn't wait. He didn't send a message or demand surrender. He stormed the city like a Northman should, with steel, fire, and fury. The Lannister guards tried to hold the walls. They failed. The common people, sick of Joffrey's cruelty, didn't resist. They opened the gates in the night, letting Robb's army flood in like a storm tide. It wasn't a long fight. It was a slaughter. Grey Wind tore through the throne room as Robb marched inside, his sword dripping with blood. Joffrey stood up, screaming, pointing his crossbow like it would save him. "I'm the king," he shouted, voice cracking. "You'll die for this!" Robb didn't even blink. "You're no king," he said, before driving his sword clean through Joffrey's chest. That was it. The mad boy king of House Lannister died, gasping on the floor of the Iron Throne room. While Grey Wind howled so loud it echoed across the city. The war wasn't over, not yet. But Joffrey's rule was finished, and with it, the lion's grip on Westeros began to break. Outside the city, people whispered the story like it was a dream. The young wolf took King's Landing, they said. The North didn't kneel. The North ruled. Robb didn't claim the Iron Throne. He had no wish to sit where kings lost their souls. Instead, he freed his sisters, Sansa and Arya, both changed in different ways by their time as prisoners. Sansa had learned to smile through pain. Arya, she had learned to kill. Cersei was taken alive, but not for long. She tried to poison Robb during the peace talks. When the cup fell from her hand and the guards grabbed her, she didn't even struggle. She just laughed. "Lions die proud," she whispered. She was executed the next morning. With the city under Stark control and the Lannisters destroyed, a new kind of rule began in Westeros. One led not by fear but by justice. Robb made a bold decision. He wouldn't be king of the Seven Kingdoms. Instead, he restored the old kingdoms, giving each region their own leader, their own rule. The North remained free, ruled by House Stark, never to kneel again. But peace is never easy in Westeros. Far to the east, Daenerys Targaryen was watching. With her dragons growing stronger, she saw the fall of the Lannisters as a sign it was time to sail west. And in the shadows of the wall, something older than kings stirred awake. News of Joffrey's death spread like wildfire through Westeros. For some it was a blessing. For others, it was a call to arms. In the Reach, House Tyrell went quiet, watching with careful eyes. They had once tied their fate to the Lannisters through Margaery's planned marriage to Joffrey. But now, with the boy king dead and Cersei executed, the Tyrells began writing letters in secret, sending ravens to both sides, to Robb in King's Landing, and to a girl across the sea who had 3 dragons behind her name. But Robb wasn't worried about alliances. Not yet. He had done the impossible, marched from the north, crushed Tywin, slain the boy king, and sat his direwolf beneath the Iron Throne. The people of King's Landing didn't cheer at first. They stared, afraid, confused, some even angry. But Robb didn't try to charm them. He didn't pretend to be their savior. He walked through the streets like a ghost, silent, cold-eyed. And everywhere he went, grey wind followed, his fur soaked in blood from the battle. Sansa watched her brother from the tower window. Free, but still not free. She had spent too long in that cursed castle, smiled through too many beatings and lies. Now her brother ruled, but the Iron Throne still stood, sharp and cruel as ever. Arya didn't care about thrones. She was different now, harder, colder. When she saw Joffrey's body in the crypts, she didn't cry. She smiled. "He died too quick," she whispered. "I wanted him to beg." One night she disappeared from her chamber, and when she returned, there was a blood-stained coin in her hand. She didn't say where she went. She just looked at Robb and said, "There's a list. And I'm not done. But Westeros doesn't rest. With the Lannisters gone, the vultures came out. The Iron Islands rose up again, declaring independence. Yara Greyjoy took the Salt Throne, claiming she would finish what her father couldn't, burn the North. In Dorne, Prince Doran stayed quiet, but the people whispered vengeance. They hadn't forgotten Elia Martell or her children, butchered during Robert's rebellion by Lannister dogs. And now that the lions were dead, their anger turned north toward those who had taken the capital. "The wolf wears the lion's crown," they said. And they didn't like it, but the real danger wasn't coming from the south or sea, it came with the snow. Maester Luwin had once said that the wall was more than just ice. It was a warning. And now the ravens brought chilling news from the north. The Night's Watch was falling silent. Rangers weren't returning. Whispers of dead men walking, not just wildlings, but things with blue eyes and frozen flesh. Robb listened. He knew the tales, the old stories. He had never believed them. Until now, one evening, a black brother rode into the city half-dead, face frozen, whispering only one word before collapsing, "White Walkers." Robb gathered his war council in the great hall of the Red Keep. Sansa sat beside him, her face calm but unreadable. Arya stood near the shadows, hand resting on the hilt of a thin blade. Jon Snow's name was mentioned more than once, though none knew where he had gone after the battle at the wall. "We hold the capital," said Great Jon Umber, pounding the table. "Let the dead march. We've got walls, swords, and fire." But Robb shook his head. "Walls won't stop the storm that's coming," he said. "If the dead rise, there's no south, no north, no throne, only survival." He looked out at the Iron Throne, still there, untouched since Joffrey's death. Its blades shone in the firelight. But it meant nothing to him now. We're done playing kings. He gave orders that shocked the room. The Iron Throne was to be melted down, its metal reforged into weapons, its legacy burned away. No more false crowns, no more boys playing gods. Some called him mad. Others called him brave. But the people called him something new, the king who broke the throne. That same night, far across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen stood on the edge of a ship, her silver hair whipping in the wind. Behind her, 3 dragons screamed into the sky. A raven sat on her shoulder bearing a message from Westeros. She read it once. Then again. Her eyes burned. "Joffrey is dead," she whispered. "And the Stark boy sits in my city." She turned to her army. "Prepare the sails. We go home." And far in the north, beyond the wall, in forests older than kings, something ancient opened its blue eyes and began to walk south. The sea was calm, but Daenerys Targaryen's heart wasn't. Her ship, Stormborn, led a fleet of 200 sails. Behind her stood the Unsullied, rows of silent warriors trained to fight without fear. Beside them, the Dothraki blood riders roared with wild joy, eager for war. But none of that comforted her, not after she read the message again. "King's Landing has fallen. Joffrey is dead. A Stark rules in your place." That name, Stark, was a thorn in her mind. She remembered Viserys mocking them when she was young. "Northern dogs," he called them. "Frozen traitors." But this Robb Stark had done what Viserys never could. He had taken the throne. He had ended the lions, and now he sat in her father's city. Fire will answer frost, she whispered as Drogon circled above, black wings casting a shadow across the deck. In King's Landing, Robb Stark stood where Aerys Targaryen had once burned men alive, the throne room, now cold and empty. The Iron Throne had been melted days ago, its swords reforged into spear tips and steel arrowheads. That monstrous symbol of power was now dust and weaponry. Arya walked beside him, wearing dark leathers and a face that rarely smiled anymore. "I need to leave," she said quietly. "Where will you go?" Robb asked. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much for a girl her age. "South," she replied. "There are still names on my list. The Hound, Melisandre, some of the Freys who escaped." Robb didn't stop her. He just nodded. "Send word if you find Jon," he said. She paused at the doorway, then added, "If Dany comes." Don't trust her smile, then she was gone. A ghost with a blade. Meanwhile, deep in the crypts of Winterfell, Bran Stark stirred in his bed. He hadn't spoken much since his fall. His eyes were always distant now, like they were seeing something far away. That night he woke screaming, shaking like a leaf. "The Night King is marching," he cried. "He's coming for the north." Maester Vulcan tried to calm him, but Bran wouldn't stop. "He's seen the throne melt. He's seen the dragons. He's seen Robb." Then he whispered a name that froze the blood of every man in that room. Jon Snow. North of the Wall, a storm raged. The snow didn't fall like normal. It howled, sharp and hateful, like knives falling from the sky. Atop a ruined tower, Tormund Giantsbane stood beside a silent man in black, Jon Snow. His beard was longer, his eyes darker. He looked like a man who had died and come back, which he had. "The wall is gone," Tormund muttered. "They broke it with something huge, bigger than a mammoth, bigger than a giant." Jon didn't speak. He only looked south. "There's no Night's Watch anymore, Jon," Tormund said after a while. "Only survivors." Then, far in the distance, a horn blew. Not once, 3 times. The dead were near. Back in King's Landing, Sansa sat in a garden that had once belonged to Cersei. The roses had been trampled during the siege. The air still smelled faintly of smoke. She didn't care. She was reading letters from the Vale and the Riverlands. Some lords offered allegiance. Others demanded Robb step down. One even dared to claim he should be king. Stannis Baratheon, writing from Storm's End, declaring himself the rightful heir now that the Lannisters were gone. Sansa tore the letter without a word. "He has a red witch," she said. "But no people." That night, a raven landed on Robb's war table. Its legs carried a scroll sealed with black wax. He broke it open. It read, "The Dead March. Eastwatch has fallen. Jon Snow leads the survivors. He comes to warn you. He carries fire. But it may not be enough." Samwell Tarly. Castle Black, what's left of it. Robb didn't wait. He called a council, sent ravens to every house that still answered his name, and ordered all smiths in the capital to forge as much dragon glass and Valyrian steel as they could find. "The war for thrones is over," he said grimly. "Now comes the war for the living." As he left the hall, the sky above King's Landing darkened. Not with clouds, with wings. Drogon Rhaegal and Viserion were here, and Daenerys Targaryen stood at the gates of the city her father once ruled, ready to claim what she believed was hers, by fire or by blood. The gates of King's Landing had seen many armies. They had opened for kings, closed for tyrants, and burned under dragon fire once before. But this time they opened to Daenerys Targaryen. Her dragons flew overhead, casting enormous shadows over the broken city. People in the streets dropped to their knees in fear or awe, unsure whether to cheer or hide. They had seen one young ruler rise already, the Wolf King. The Northerner who had killed Joffrey and melted the Iron Throne. Now they saw the Dragon Queen, and they wondered which fire would burn them worse. Daenerys entered the Red Keep with her head high, silver hair glowing in the sunlight. Her guards flanked her, the Unsullied moving like one silent creature. Robb Stark waited at the top of the steps. He wore no crown, just his sword. The two rulers locked eyes. "You sit in my father's castle," Daenerys said, her voice calm but cold. "And you bring fire to a city already burned," Robb replied. "I don't want the throne." "I never did. Then why are you here?" "To protect the realm." Daenerys raised an eyebrow. "From what?" Robb looked north. "From what's coming." They spoke in the great hall, the same place where kings had once passed cruel judgment. Now it was filled with warriors from two worlds. Northerners stared down unsullied. Dothraki sneered at Stark bannermen. The room smelled of tension and the ghosts of old wars. Sansa stood at Robb's side, her eyes sharp. She didn't trust Daenerys. Arya was nowhere to be seen, gone, perhaps hunting again. Only Bran, quiet and strange, whispered to himself in a corner. "The dead don't care about birthright," Robb told Daenerys. "They don't care who your father was, or mine. They're coming to kill us all." "I have dragons," Daenerys said. "Then let's pray they're enough." The next day a black horse rode through the gates of the city. Half dead, cloaked in snow and blood, Jon Snow. His eyes were red from windburn and grief. He had ridden for days without sleep, fleeing the shattered remains of Eastwatch. Tormund rode behind him, silent and grim. Others followed, wildlings, a few scattered black brothers. All hardened by the storm they had barely escaped, Jon collapsed before the council, dirt-streaked and hollow-eyed. "They're not stories," he rasped. "They're not myths. I've seen them, thousands, dead men, white as ice, eyes like stars walking through fire and snow. The Night King leads them." Bran stood, his voice trembling. "He's seen the dragons." "He's seen you, Jon." Jon's eyes locked with Daenerys. "You'll need more than dragons." Over the next few days, the city turned into a forge. Dragonglass was melted into blades. Valyrian steel was reforged into swords. Masters scoured old texts for spells long forgotten. Dothraki learned to fight side by side with wildlings. The Unsullied drilled with Northerners. And for the first time in centuries, the great houses stopped fighting each other, because something worse was coming. But peace never lasts long in Westeros. Whispers grew louder. Daenerys thinks Robb wants the throne. Robb fears Daenerys will burn everything to take it. Jon, he's a Targaryen too, isn't he? In the shadows, Lord Varys pulled strings. He met with Sansa Stark under the cover of night. "You know what fire does to people," he whispered. "Even those with good hearts." "She freed slaves," Sansa replied. "She brought peace to cities and left them in ash and ruin." Sansa said nothing, but she didn't stop the conversation either. Meanwhile, Arya had returned to Westeros, a different girl than the one who left. She moved through shadows like smoke. Her list had grown shorter. Beric Dondarrion dead beyond the wall, Thoros gone. But the Hound, still alive. And Melisandre, she would pay for stealing Gendry's blood. But as Arya prepared for revenge, she stumbled on something darker. She found a raven, carrying a sealed message marked with the sigil of House Martell. Inside, the words were few but sharp. "The Dragon Queen must not sit the throne. We have waited too long. When the dead come, let the wolves die too." Dorne was not coming to help. They were coming for power. Arya didn't report the letter. Not yet. She wanted to see who would betray first. Atop the city walls, Daenerys stood with Jon, watching her dragons fly. "I never asked for this," Jon said quietly. "Neither did I," she replied. There was silence for a moment. Then she added, "But you have Targaryen blood. I have the North." Daenerys looked at him, something soft in her eyes. "Maybe we need both." But below them, in the darkest corners of the city, Varys whispered to his little birds. Plans were being made. Not all alliances were strong, not all loyalties true. And far beyond the wall, the Night King rode a dead horse, Viserion flying above him, blue fire in its throat. Winter wasn't coming anymore. Winter was here. It began with a whisper, no horns, no banners, no warning, just silence. The small northern town of Deepwood Motte, held by loyal House Glover, vanished in a single night. The snow swallowed everything, men, women, children, horses. Only one survivor made it back, riding half-frozen and blind, screaming about shadows with eyes like ice. When the Raven arrived in King's Landing, Robb Stark slammed his fist through the table. "They've crossed the neck," he said through gritted teeth. "The dead are in the Riverlands." Panic broke out in the War Council. Lords shouted over each other. Some demanded retreat to the Eyrie. Others wanted to abandon the south and fortify the north. Only Daenerys stayed quiet. Staring into the flames of the fireplace, Drogon coiled around the balcony above like a sleeping god. "This is not a war of castles," she said finally. "This is a war of extinction," Jon Snow agreed. "We can't defend every town. We fall back to Moat Cailin, hold the line there. It's narrow enough to trap them," Robb nodded. But Sansa frowned. "And what about the people?" she asked. "You want to abandon them?" "No," Robb said softly. "We'll fight for every life we can. But we can't win if we try to save everything." That night, Varys met with Tyrion in the old dungeons beneath the Red Keep. Cobwebs hung from rusted chains. Rats scurried in the shadows. The place still smelled like blood. "She's planning something," Varys whispered. "The Dragon Queen." Tyrion leaned against the wall, sipping wine. "She wants peace," he replied. "She's just seen too much war to believe in kindness. She will burn this city if she thinks she has to, and the North will never kneel. It's only a matter of time before one tries to kill the other." Varys looked Tyrion in the eye. "And what of Jon Snow?" Tyrion hesitated. "He's not like the others. He doesn't want the throne." "No," Varys said, stepping into the light. "But perhaps that's why he should have it." Arya moved like wind through the castle, quiet and unseen. She had stolen the face of a maid and slipped past guards with ease. Her list had grown smaller, but her suspicions were growing. She had overheard things. Whispers of plots, poison, fire and betrayal. She followed a hooded man through the corridors and watched as he passed a note to a cloaked figure in the gardens. She crept closer. Her heart froze when she saw the face. Varys, and in the note, "Jon Snow, true heir, must rule." Daenerys cannot be trusted, Arya clenched her jaw. If war was coming from the north, another one was already growing inside the walls. Meanwhile, Jon stood on the city walls with Ghost beside him, watching the clouds thicken over the land. The air smelled wrong, sharp, cold, like steel and death. He heard footsteps behind him. Daenerys joined him, her expression softer than before. "They're coming," she said, "and I'm still not sure whose side everyone's on." Jon glanced at her. "You have dragons. That should be enough." She turned to face him. "I don't want it to be enough. I want to fight beside people who believe in me, not just fear me." Jon looked down, then spoke carefully. "There's something I didn't want to tell you. Something Sam told me." He paused. "My real name is Aegon Targaryen." Daenerys stepped back like she'd been slapped. "What?" Jon nodded. "Your brother Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark, I'm their son. I'm your nephew." Silence. The snow fell harder now, Daenerys whispered. "So you have a claim to the throne." Jon shook his head. "I don't want it. I never have." But something in Daenerys' eyes had already changed. The next day, Varys was arrested. Guards dragged him from his chambers as ravens scattered from his windows. Robb, Jon, Sansa, Daenerys and Tyrion gathered in the courtyard as Grey Worm stood with a sword. Daenerys didn't blink. "He betrayed us all," she said coldly. "He tried to divide us before the dead even reached our gates." Varys said nothing. He only looked at Jon. "I hope I'm wrong about her," he said. Then Grey Worm's blade ended it, but that wasn't the end. That night, Jon found a letter tucked under his door. It was unsigned, scrawled in a shaky hand. "The North is divided. Dawn is riding. Daenerys burns those who doubt her. You are the only one who can stop her before it's too late. The dead are not the only danger." Jon read it twice. Then he lit it on fire. But the flame in his heart wouldn't go out. In the darkness beyond the wall, the Night King stood before the gates of Last Hearth, his army of the dead behind him. The castle's torches flickered, then all light vanished. Another house fell to silence, and the snow kept falling south. They came in the dark, not marching, not screaming, just moving, like shadows crawling across snow, silent and endless. The army of the dead had reached the Riverlands. And Moat Cailin was their first true test. Robb Stark stood on the high ramparts as the blizzard howled like a dying beast. Below him, tens of thousands of fighters braced for the storm. Northerners in heavy cloaks, wildlings with obsidian blades, unsullied in perfect lines. Even Dothraki, restless and cold, ready to charge. Jon stood beside him, ghost at his feet. "They're close," he whispered. Then the screaming began. From the fog came the first wave, whites with eyes burning blue, their bodies rotted and frozen, some missing limbs, others crawling on all fours like beasts. The living met them head-on, steel clashing against bone, fire lighting up the night. Drogon swooped down like a god of war, his flame tearing through the dead, his roar shaking the trees. Rhaegal followed, crashing into a group of giants turned white, burning them to ash. For a moment, the living had hope. Then Viserion came, dead, blue-eyed, wings torn and skeletal, and breathing ice fire. He struck the left flank of Robb's army, turning dozens into blackened statues. The scream of dying men froze in the wind. Jon tried to reach him, sword drawn, but the ice dragon vanished into the clouds again. Robb fought like a Northman, blade dripping, grey wind beside him, ripping through the dead like fury unleashed. But even he could see it. They were being pushed back, and the Night King hadn't even arrived yet. Inside the fortress, Sansa and Tyrion directed civilians to the crypts, just like Winterfell once did. But they both knew, if the dead broke the walls, nowhere would be safe. Sansa looked up at the sky. "We'll die here," she said flatly. Tyrion, sipping a flask he had hidden in his boot, gave her a sad smile. "Then at least we die with less Lannisters around." But Sansa wasn't laughing. Her eyes had caught something. A rider, cloaked in red, arriving through the storm. Melisandre, outside. Arya ran through the battlefield, dancing between death like a shadow. Her blade needle was red with blood. In her other hand, she held a dagger of dragonglass. She moved faster than the whites, faster than thought. She wasn't just fighting, she was hunting. But then she saw him, the Night King, riding through the mist on his undead horse, calm as chaos raged around him. He looked toward the ramparts and smiled. That's when it happened, the betrayal. From behind Robb, one of his most trusted bannermen, Lord Rickard Karstark, turned on him. In the chaos of the fight, Karstark drove his blade toward Robb's back. Grey wind lunged just in time. Taking the blow himself, Robb turned, eyes wide, gutting Karstark down with a single strike. But the damage was done. Grey wind stumbled back, howling in pain, blood soaking his fur. "Why?" Robb shouted, grief breaking through his voice. Karstark, choking on his own blood, whispered, "The North should rule the North, not follow dragons." Then he died. The left flank collapsed. The dead surged forward. Drogon was wounded. Rhaegal vanished into the clouds and the night. King raised his hand. All who had died began to rise, including men Robb knew, including Karstark. Even Grey Wind tried to rise, growling low and unnatural. Before Robb, shaking with rage, drove a dragonglass dagger through the direwolf's heart, tears falling as he whispered, "Thank you for everything." Then the fire came. Melisandre stood on the ramparts, arms raised, eyes glowing in the wind. "Azor Ahai, come forth." The ground trembled. From the forest behind the moat, hundreds of torches lit up, reinforcements, House Aaron, House Tarly, even men from Dorne, riding in with flame-tipped spears. They had finally come. The tide shifted, but the Night King didn't flinch. He raised his hand again, and Viserion returned, screaming across the sky. And this time he headed straight for the walls, right where Daenerys stood. Jon screamed her name, but everything turned white. The explosion rocked the field. Ice fire smashed through stone. The rampart crumbled, and when the dust cleared, Daenerys was gone. No one saw her fall. No one saw Drogon flee, wounded and howling. Only Jon, standing among the rubble, saw what was left. One burned glove, and the Night King, still smiling. The silence after the blast was worse than the battle. Not even the dead moved. Snowflakes drifted through the smoke, settling on broken shields and burnt bones. Where once the Red Queen had stood, calling fire from the gods, now only ash and ruin remained. Jon dropped to his knees near the crater, brushing aside rubble with bare hands. The burned glove, Daenerys's glove, lay in his palm, still warm. No body, no blood, just absence. Tyrion stood behind him, stunned, lips trembling. "She was right there," he said. "She was right. She's not dead," Jon whispered. "I'd feel it." Tyrion didn't argue. His eyes were red. All around them, the dead pressed closer again. The brief hope brought by the arrival of the southern houses was already breaking. The Night King hadn't even drawn his blade, and the living were retreating. Robb limped through the courtyard, blood soaking his side where a white had clawed deep. His face was pale, grief and fury twisting his voice. "Where is Arya?" No one answered. He looked at Jon. "We need a miracle. Far away from the front lines." Arya Stark stalked the Night King. She had waited, watched him ride alone through the mist, never lifting a weapon, never hurrying, just watching as his army tore through the living. He had to die. He had to die tonight. But as she moved closer, hidden behind twisted trees and piles of corpses, something strange happened. The Night King stopped and slowly turned his head toward her. He was smiling. Before she could move, the ground cracked beneath her feet. Hands shot out of the earth, grabbing her legs. The dead had waited for her. She fought like fury, blades flashing, but there were too many. A blow struck her ribs. Another split her lip, and then she was gone, swallowed by the snow. Back at the keep, Robb ordered the retreat to the inner walls. Only a third of their fighters remained. The Unsullied had lost half their number. The Dothraki were scattered. Wildlings and Northerners held what ground they could, but their arms were slow and their hope slower. Sansa stood on the walls, her hands trembling as she watched the firelight dim below. She had seen what happened to Deepwood Motte. She had read the letters. The Vale would not send more men. Dorne's prince had been killed in the first charge. She looked to Tyrion. "Is this how it ends?" Tyrion didn't answer. He was watching Jon. Jon Snow was walking toward the battlefield, alone. He carried Longclaw in one hand. His other fist gripped the dragon-glass dagger Arya had given him months ago. Ghost followed at his side, limping but silent. Jon walked until he stood on the last burning stretch of ground before the fog. Then he shouted, "Come out!" The Night King emerged from the mist, tall, pale, ancient. Behind him, Viserion flew overhead, his wings silent. The dead flanked his path and parted as he walked. Jon raised his sword. "No thrones, no crowns, just you and me." The Night King said nothing, but he drew his blade. Ice-forged and sharp enough to cut through time, they clashed, and the world held its breath. The duel was unlike anything the soldiers had ever seen. Jon moved with fury, fire in his blood, grief in his bones. But the Night King was cold precision. Every strike of his blade froze the air. Every block sent shockwaves through Jon's arms, and still they fought. Tyrion watched from the walls. "Where's the dragon?" he asked quietly. Then they heard it, a roar, so loud it cracked the sky. Drogon wounded, bleeding, alive, and on his back wrapped in furs. Eyes burning like wildfire. Daenerys Targaryen. She had survived. She had flown into the clouds when the blast hit, barely clinging to Drogon's saddle as the flames devoured the keep. Her hair was scorched, her skin torn, but her spirit untouched. She saw Jon below, fighting death itself, and she screamed one word, "Dracarys." Drogon opened his mouth, and fire rained down from the sky. The flame hit the Night King dead on. Everything around him exploded in heat and light. The ground shattered. The air howled. Jon fell back, shielding his face. But when the fire cleared, the Night King still stood, unburnt and smiling. He raised his hand again. Jon looked around. The men they had lost, their friends, their brothers, their sisters, began to rise again, eyes blue, lips silent, even some of the Dothraki, even some of the Unsullied, even Tormund Giant's bane. Jon's face broke. This was not a battle they could win, not with swords, not with fire, not with dragons, not like this, far away. Beneath the snow, Arya's hand broke through the ice. She gasped, pulled herself free, bloodied and frozen. She wasn't done yet, and she still had one blade. The battlefield was a graveyard. Bodies covered the snow like broken statues. The only sound was the crackling of dying flames and the low hiss of the wind. The Night King stood in the center, untouched by dragonfire, unmoved by war. Behind him the dead waited, still as stone, ready to end the world with one wordless command. Jon Snow stood opposite him, barely holding Longclaw, blood dripping from his brow. His friends were gone. His strength was nearly gone too, but his eyes, they still burned. Daenerys hovered above on Drogon, her breathing shallow, her hands shaking. The blast hadn't killed her, but it had changed her. She had seen her armies fall, her dreams burn, and her fire fail. And for the first time in her life, she was afraid. The Night King turned his head toward her. Just a glance, and Drogon shrieked in fear. Then he raised his hand again. The dead surged forward, all of them. Inside the broken keep, Sansa and Tyrion prepared the final fallback. The crypts. No more ravens, no more exits, just waiting. Sansa turned to Tyrion, and for once her voice cracked. "If we die down here, I just want you to know, I never hated you." Tyrion gave a crooked smile. "That's the highest compliment a Stark's ever given me." Then the torches flickered. The temperature dropped, and the whisper of bones on stone echoed through the tunnel. The dead had found them, back on the battlefield. Jon watched as his brothers, his friends, even Tormund charged at him with blue eyes and twisted faces. He raised Longclaw, but his arms shook. He couldn't do it. He couldn't kill them again. Then a blur passed in front of him. A small figure, vast as a ghost, Arya. She slammed into the crowd of whites, twin blades flashing like lightning. She cut down 2, 3, 4. Then she was swallowed again, lost in the sea of death. "Arya!" Jon screamed, but she didn't answer. She was hunting something, someone. Above them, Daenerys gritted her teeth, eyes locked on the Night King. "Again!" she whispered. Drogon roared, and fire rained down once more. It surrounded the Night King in a ring of flame, but again he did not burn. Instead, he stepped through it, slow and calm. Like a god walking across the sun, he raised his blade, and for the first time he spoke a single word. Cold, ancient, fall. And Drogon collapsed, not dead, but broken. Wings cracked, bones shattered. He hit the earth with a crash that shook the mountains. Daenerys tumbled from the saddle, coughing, crawling, defenseless. The Night King walked toward her, sword raised, no one close enough to help. Until Jon screamed. He ran. No thought, no fear, just rage. He struck. The Night King blocked. Steel met ice. They clashed once more, this time with the last of Jon's strength. But the Night King was faster now, stronger. He stabbed Jon through the side. Clean. Jon fell to his knees, blood pouring from his mouth. Daenerys tried to crawl to him, but her body gave out. The Night King raised his sword again, and then froze. His blue eyes widened. Behind him, a whisper of footsteps. Then, the sting of Valyrian steel. Arya. She had come from the blind spot, leapt from the back of a dead giant, spun mid-air, and drove the dagger into the Night King's chest. Not just any dagger. The one Bran gave her, the one meant for a Stark, the one that killed the first White Walker. The Night King looked down. His smile faded. He shattered. Just like that, the whites fell, mid-stride. Tormund's eyes turned brown again as he crumpled to the ground. The dead all around collapsed, like puppets with cut strings. Even Viserion let out one final, broken breath before falling still forever. Silence, real silence, the kind that doesn't know if it's peace or just the eye of another storm. Jon woke in Daenerys' arms, barely alive. "I thought you were gone," she whispered. "I almost was." He looked around. "Is it over?" Arya stood in the smoke, eyes hollow, face streaked in blood. "It's over," she said. But nothing feels finished. Days passed. They burned the dead, friend and foe, on giant pyres that lit up the sky for miles. Robb stood beside Jon, both battered, both changed. "I lost Grey Wind," Robb said. "I lost myself," Jon replied. "And now?" "I think we all did. In the great hall of the Red Keep, or what was left of it, the surviving leaders gathered: Sansa, Tyrion, Robb, Jon, Arya, Daenerys. The realm was broken, shattered, empty. Who would lead? Who should? Jon looked at the throne room, the melted metal, the ashes, and shook his head. "No more kings," he said. "No more queens. Let the kingdoms rule themselves." "We've earned it." Daenerys looked at him, wounded, but slowly nodded. "Westeros would be free, not ruled by one, but by many, a council of kingdoms, where no throne held power alone, not a perfect peace, but a beginning." That night, Arya stood at the docks. "I'm not meant for palaces," she told Jon. "I'm sailing west, where no maps go." He hugged her tighter than ever. Robb returned to the north. Sansa ruled the north, a queen without a crown. Daenerys left with Drogon's last egg, vanishing into the east. Jon rode beyond the wall again to rebuild what the Watch once protected. He left as Jon Snow, but in the stories that followed, they called him something else. The last king who never ruled.